Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar from Reuters Events. This is about enabling efficiency with automated FNOL, and it's really that beginning of the moment of truth that we all talk about in insurance and the tone that we set for efficiency, for meeting customer expectations, and this tension that we can get into where we're trying to have empathy and the human side of standing by people in these very difficult moments, yet also needing to be mindful of what's happening on the LAE side and our efficiency and our automation and our throughput, especially when our teams are dispersed and we need to do things more digitally. How do you balance both of those requirements, the empathy and the efficiency, and really deliver the best claim product at an acceptable cost? So great conversation that we have for you all today. This is part of the lead up to the Connected Claims Conference that is coming in November, so you can watch for that. And next week is the Future of Insurance Conference, where from Reuters Events, where you can get even more insight about all the things that are pushing the industry forward and where things are heading. I'm your moderator for today. I'm Brian Falchuk. I'm the managing partner of Insurance Evolution Partners and the author of the Future of Insurance book series, where the next one comes out next week at the Future of Insurance Conference. So shameless plug for that, but hopefully that's of interest to everybody. And I'm a former CCO, so this is right in my wheelhouse. This is the stuff that I care about. So I am very excited to get into this conversation today. I'm also really lucky to be joined by a great panel. So we have Caroline Faulkner, who's the SVP and Head of Enabling Solutions for Prudential Financial. We have Bill Brower, who's the Vice President and Head of U.S. Auto Claims Strategy for Lexis Nexis Risk Solutions, and Lance Albright, who is the Assistant Vice President for QBE North America. With that, we're going to jump into just some opening thoughts from everyone. And the nice thing about that is it will start to seed things in all of your mind, the audience, where you can ask your questions. So while you're hearing from our great panel, I want you to start thinking about what you want us to talk about. Please put your questions in the Q&A box right at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Just hit that Q&A button, not the chat, the Q&A. And we will spend the bulk of our conversation today focusing on the things that you want to hear from the panel about. So please do ask your questions, and I will continue to ask you to submit them throughout, but you can start at any time. So with that, Caroline, I'm going to hand it over to you to kick things off and share some thoughts from your perspective.
Thank you, Brian. And hello, everybody. I'm really delighted to be with you all today, along with my fellow panel members. And I really appreciate Reuters inviting me. A very important topic. So before I start, I want to give a little bit of background on me, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what our organization does within Prudential. And then I'd like to wrap up with some examples on how we're transforming our service organization, particularly as it relates to, as Brian says, claims and that first notification of loss. So I would describe my abbreviated resume goes something like this. I started my career in the pharma industry as a software engineer, and I joined Prudential 21 years ago. And over that period, I was lucky enough to be able to stand up 2 startups and to manage Prudential's tech and operations subsidiary in Ireland before I relocated to the USA 5 years ago. And inside the mothership, I was asked to establish an organization which I called Enabling Solutions. And the mandate was really to consolidate and run the day-to-day service organizations. And that included contact centers and back office functions. But in Prudential, it wasn't just for one business. This was to be done across 4 very different businesses, which was our retirement business, our individual life insurance business, our group insurance business, and our annuities business. And so you can imagine that there were some interesting challenges here because we are not just B2C, but we're B2B and we're B2B2C. And so we're serving individuals, we're serving intermediaries and institutions. And so as we know that comes up with all different flavors of how you're going to interact and engage and solution. So the thing that won't surprise most people who have been in a similar boat is, as separate businesses, they all had their various flavors of technology, process, and different operating models. And so as I think back to sort of the last 8 months, what really our remit was, we had to stand up at, first of all, a transformation work stream, not just to drive technology and process improvements, but also just to enhance our employee engagement with the goal of really three things: simplification, better customer experience, and to lower the costs. And from a talent equation, this also involves really creating the service professionals of the future. So that's a little backdrop just on my past, how I got here, and really what's on the plate for us to solve. So I did want to talk a little bit about how we're actually transforming, because you can imagine there's a lot of kit and caboodle already in place that has been established over a very long time in a company that's been around for over 140 years. So there's, we all wish for a magic wand, but we can't change everything. So we had to come from it at the point of view, like, without changing everything, how do we determine the right level of simplicity and consistency for our customers? And specifically for those customers that straddle those different business lines, because if they're doing things very uniquely, we start to look like a different company depending on where they hit our books. So we had to, first of all, look at common ways to measure our business as usual, because that then afforded us the ability to develop the insights that we would need. And also we established a voice of the customer program that also used data analytics. So we really wanted to listen and learn from our customers. And it also gave us that opportunity of seeing ourselves through our customers' eyes, not just through our eyes. We often have an inside out kind of point of view, and we really wanted to flip that and become more outside in point of view. And so that took an inordinate amount of what I call foundational work, and the non-glamorous, you can't really see the benefit work, but it has to be done. And as part of that, we established the key customer journeys. And that was really about redefining and simplifying the end-to-end experience. And we came at that from really key principles: digital first, with a major focus on paper elimination. And that might sound very basic, but if you think about all of the, I call the small pipes within our business that touches the customer, that we had to come with a principle-based approach because we couldn't solve everything. And we needed to hone into the areas that were causing the most pain, but also what was going to give us the best relief in terms of the solutions that we had to implement. And I really want to just talk about that in terms of just the three themes that I know everybody is very familiar with, is that people, process, and technology lens. And I really want to start with our people and our culture, because I truly believe that our associates are the most important asset, particularly when it comes to listening to our customers and delivering the claims experience that they deserve. And first of all, it starts with mindsets, challenging the way things have always been done. And we cultivated and put a lot of time into cultivating a culture of ideation. And it's really starting to work, because our associates have created over 1,000 ideas that really help our customers at their greatest time of need. We're inundated with that, and it's creating an empowering culture. So rather than I have extra things to do, our associates are like, I get to shape this, and they know best. They're the closest to the customer. So that started to really bear fruit. And what I love about that is that it has led to a lot of what I call non-tech initiatives that have resulted in things like us being able to do same-day claim payouts. And we all know that technology is the thing we have to wait on for longer. So the more you can tweak when it comes to those kinds of things and process re-engineering, it really helps us to remove the complexity. Sometimes when we look at the complexity, we have to examine, is that driven by us? Is that driven by some risk-averse requirement that we can now re-examine in the light of we're 2021? We're in the post-pandemic. We've learned a lot. Like what can we challenge? What can we change? And where possible, we have automated rules so that routine tasks, they can be fulfilled by robotic process automation or bots, as we call them. We're also making our processes paperless through points of call, claim out, and guided digital experiences. And then because we have institutional customers, we started to look at those in ways in which, how do we focus on getting more information upfront about the individuals under that, so that could make our servicing the individuals easier when they engage at that moment that matters. And so that's sort of like the people and process aspect. A little bit about technology, and then I'll wrap up. What I would say about technology, it really is our biggest lift, but it's still the longest pole in the tent. And we continue to invest, and we're balancing our strategic longer term investments, such as we've got an enterprise service platform, but we also need to balance that with the shorter term automation solutions that remove the customer burdens. And some of that I've mentioned. But I would say that one of the benefits of the pandemic is that it forced us into some areas of ingenuity and speed that I don't think we would have naturally come across in the course of just doing ordinary business. And it really helped us to establish digital channels. And I would say the pandemic offered extra incentive to our customers to adopt them. So things that we've been trying for years to get customers to go with paperless or take an EFT over a check, it was now way more attractive because we had the UPS challenges and people were just in dire need of timely payment. So between, switching these things on and having adoption, we started to get a lot of impetus on that. Other things such as, getting electronic signatures, proof of eligibility, we fast tracked an awful lot of the mechanics there. And one of the things was, not only establishing the channel, but we had to make our customers aware that that channel exists and then driving them to that self-service first. That's where we were able to make the processes simple and intuitive. Where possible, and this wasn't across the board, but we started to try to avoid where any human decision making. Where could we embed AI so that that workflow would do the work and it would assess the risk and it would make it more consistent actually and solid decisions. And I'd say another area which was actually a fast track area, we knew that we couldn't start building everything new. We couldn't start everything as new, but we had a load of different assets that we already looked at that were maybe underutilized, things like DocuSign, things like our claims and tech. So we digital assets and we looked at the percentage utilization, they were low. So rather than have to build a new faucet, we were saying, how do we open the faucet wider and start to get more throughput here? And we also, used interfaces so that we could proactively gather data on the policyholders, do external searches on digital obituaries and so forth. Those were things that we, really leaned into. We have an RPA practice and we doubled down on developing some bots to do things like auto adjudication of claims that were under a certain threshold and criteria. And for our institutional customers, we created an employee portal so that they could upload standardized employee and beneficiary data information. And so we've many, many examples of the bots that we have built. And I won't go into them all today, but a lot of them not only benefited the customer experience, but they were very efficient in terms of cost, and they allowed our staff to work on more meaningful work at a time when we were snowed under, and I know everybody was snowed under. And so that really gave some not only sort of triple benefit. So I'll just wrap up my comments just to say that we have really tried to expedite our solutions and we've tried to make life easier for our customers. And, to do that, it certainly took a village and many ideas to streamline and to speed up where we needed to most. But working with great people is a game changer. And also balancing that short term versus the longer term wins across the people, process, technology, that has been paramount in making sure that our customers are feeling the benefits of the continuum. And it's also empowering to our staff. And it truly puts them in the shoes of our customers and in terms of the practical solutions that they can implement. So those are a few nuggets on sort of how we've weathered the storm lately and the things that we've been putting into place.
Oh, that's really valuable. I know we're already getting questions, so definitely was a valuable thing for people to listen to, and that's a hint. You should keep asking your questions. But Caroline, there were a few things that you said that I've got questions about and curiosity, but it really feels like a realignment to what's going on in the customers' lives and minds, but also your associates, the employees in different roles in different places, because that's your next tightest connection to the customers, and they're the ones who are using the tools that are out there to deliver that service to customers. So thinking more broadly about how we're enabling things, there's no question that mindset is so critical. So thank you for sharing all that. I'm sure people will have more questions on it. I want to turn to Bill Brower, who joins us from Lexis Nexis Risk Solutions as head of the U.S. Auto Claims Strategy. Bill, I've got some slides for you that I'm going to put up in a second, but we'll turn it over to you so you can take things away.
Thanks so much, and thanks so much, Caroline. And I really enjoyed your comments. Digital first. That's probably the slogan this year as we've gone through COVID. So let me just tag on to what Caroline said for a moment about COVID. So what I think about COVID is that from the auto insurance standpoint, COVID accelerated the customer's appetite for digital service. If you think about it, pretty much we all think digital first today. So last year, the big change in auto insurance, of course, was the photo estimating, the virtual estimating process. If you look back to just say January or February of last year of 2020, maybe 10 or maybe 20% of claims were handled virtually with virtual photos. And then right after the lockdown began in March and April, carriers said they moved to about 100% virtual. I mean, this was overnight. It was a huge shift. We now hear from carriers that it's settled down a bit, but still over 60% of claims tend to be handled from photographs, and customers really love it. And so that's been a big change. I've been in the industry over 30 years. I've never seen change happen that quickly. So people ask me quite often, Bill, what's next? What's the next big change coming to insurance? So my prediction, and I guess here on this webinar, I'll make my prediction that by 2025, half of the non-injury auto claims will be reported via self-service. Now, most likely an app using digital, but think about that. Today, only about 10% of claims are reported self-service, according to many of the industry leaders today, but moving to 50% in just 3 to 4 years is huge. I'm not so sure now that may not happen even earlier. Brian, if you go to the next slide, I'll kind of explain why I think that is possible. And I'm sure the questions are, well, Bill, yeah, that's interesting, but what gives you, what evidence do you have that suggests we're going to move that quickly? So Lexis Nexis has been completing this study. We've been doing this every other year. We began in 2017. We call it the Future of Claims Study. In 2017, we did the very first study. In that year, we interviewed only executives. And by the way, all of these studies over the years have been blind studies. So we use an outside agency so we don't bias things with the Lexis Nexis name attached. But we asked executives, what do you think about the future of claims? That's when we introduced this idea of touchless claims. Fast forward in 2019, the second study we did, we actually asked not only insurance executives, but we asked consumers, over 1,700 consumers we also surveyed. And also they did not realize the study was for us, but we asked them, what do they think about claims automation? And we asked a series of questions really related to how they feel about automation. How do they feel about things like first notice of loss being self-service? Now, fast forward to just last month in May, we released our 2021 Future of Claims Study. And one of the areas that we focused on was going back to those same questions that we asked consumers, and these were customers of insurance companies, by the way, 2 years ago. We asked the very same questions again in this study, and think about it. 2019 was pre-COVID. This survey was after COVID. We were in the middle of COVID. Actually, the questions for those people were asked in the fourth quarter, once people knew there was a vaccine coming. And so let me just share with you some of the things that we learned. So we did ask, what's your perception of claims automation? What do you think about that? And what are the benefits, if any? So what consumers told us in this study was they love the ability to report a claim anytime, anywhere, handle their claim anytime, anywhere, kind of at their convenience. 62% of all consumers told us that. By the way, out of the 1,750 consumers that we interviewed, 1,000 of those people had a claim in the last 2 years. And of that 1,000, I think it was a little over 280 of those customers had a claim since COVID began. So we got some really good insights. By the way, the study is available at Lexis Nexis Risk Solutions. if you're interested in downloading a copy. There's a ton of information we don't have time to go into today, but I did want to bring these to your attention. So consumers said, hey, I love the benefit of being able to handle my claim anytime, anywhere. I love faster claim service. I think what happened last year with photo estimating, and think about it, the industry turned on a dime. We didn't have time to go through the normal checks and balances and checking with consumers to get more voice of customer. The industry just had to move quickly. But customers liked it. It worked. They got their estimate quickly. They got paid quickly. 55% of customers in this most recent survey said they really love that. And that's up from the prior survey by 5 points. And then complete information. Someone asked me about this in a recent meeting about why did I think that was a benefit. I think for me personally, I interact with other service providers electronically quite a bit. Not so much insurance, but if I'm dealing with my lawn service or I'm dealing with some other service that's helping me at my home, I like to interact digitally, and I get text or I get a message in an app. To me, it feels more complete. I can go back and refer to it if I have questions. I'm not concerned about whether I misunderstood someone on a phone call. So the second area there at the bottom, we also got more specific, and we said, well, how would you feel about reporting your claim digitally in the future? Keeping in mind, 1,000 people had a claim, 280 had a claim since COVID. When you look at millennials and Gen X, almost half of those people said, hey, yeah, I'm good. I'm game for this. I would report my claim digitally. Even if you look at my group, the older group, the baby boomer group, over a third at 36% said yes. I think I would try that digital as long as it's easy and it's convenient. So how do we get there? What do we do? And the thing I think that we need to keep in mind is this move to virtual, like we didn't create the capability in March of last year to do this. The capabilities were there. The industry just simply adopted them and moved quickly. And so as I look at this, the capability that we have in the industry to move to digital reporting or self-service reporting is there already. But it's really about executing on what technologies are there, and it's making sure the tools benefit the customer and that it's easy for the customer. So Brian, if you'll move to the next slide. If I were to give you advice, I'd say there's 3 things I would do in order to move to a more self-service digital claim. First of all, you've got to bring in real-time data. The last thing I want to do when I go to an app is I don't want to type. My thumbs are not very good when it comes to my phone and trying to type, right? So pre-fill the data and make it easy so I can point and click. Maybe I take a picture or two, but I can answer some questions. I just don't want to type. And my team at Lexis Nexis, we manage the claim solutions. And so we are very involved in providing this type of data to our clients. And we're seeing that the growth has just been amazing, that clients are bringing this data in. So take advantage of it. The data's there. Make sure it's in your app as well as maybe at your call center. Secondly, it's making sure that customers feel comfortable about security of their data. The identity access management piece is very important. And I caution insurers because we did make this move very quickly in March and April. And are there steps that were probably, I wouldn't say skipped, but maybe moved very quickly by? And yes, I think most would say yes. And I would say one of the areas would be making sure that the cybersecurity protocols are as tight as they need to be so that customers are comfortable sharing their information and not being concerned about that information being misused. In our survey of the future of claims study, while we heard customers say, yeah, I love digital and I like this idea, over 60%, I believe it was 61% of customers expressed concern about the security of their data. So that could be both. I want to know that I'm dealing really with Bill Brower, but I also want to make sure that I understand that the device that Bill's using to communicate with me on hasn't been compromised. And so there's tools in place again today that take care of this. And I think that's important. And then finally, it's about making the experience simple for the customer. Make sure that customers find this to be a simple self-service application. I was with a colleague in the insurance industry just recently in a similar meeting, and we talked about moving to more of an automated claims process. And the thing that stuck with me, the gentleman said, was when you think about moving to self-service, self-service has to be so easy, or digital has to be so easy, that I think about that before I think about picking up the phone and calling. It has to be that simple. So the next slide, and actually the last slide I have, and I'll wrap up, is just how do we make it simple? So again, over the years, I had the good fortune of being in this industry even before the days of computers and computer processing and all of that. So I've watched the evolution. I know that that a few years ago, many insurance companies began to move things like a first notice application to an app and to a website. I think the challenge that we had when we first made the move is that many times it was sort of the questions that were used at the call center got moved to sort of a digital application. And when that happened, it wasn't very customer friendly. And so I think that's part of this real-time data to make sure that we're making this simple. We're not asking as many questions. But the other thing is, how do you access that app? So one of the things that I hear from customers when I talk to individuals about claims is that, Bill, my insurance company has an app. And I think I did download that a few years ago when I bought my policy, but I don't ever use it. So if I have a claim, how am I going to, am I going to know what to do? So I think there's technology, again, available today that can really solve that problem. The QR codes, I have become a huge fan of the QR code. I buy my coffee in the morning at my favorite coffee shop. I turn on my app and my QR code is what I use to pay for it. And I don't have to pull a cash or credit card. But it's used in so many ways. I use it when I go into a restaurant and maybe I'm waiting on the waiter to come by, but I see the QR code. I can pull up the menu and begin to make my order before anyone arrives. QR codes are used in many, many different ways today. Why not use it to help the customer access the appropriate page in the app to start a claim, right? So for apps that are really powered with this type of technology, the customer may have the QR code on their insurance card. They may get it text to them. They may call the call center and maybe there's a bit of a overload that particular Monday morning and they hear a prompt that says, press 1 if you'd like us to text you a code to process your claim electronically. However you send it, think about that type of technology to engage the customer the way the customer wants to engage so they can get right into the information you need to get that claim started. And again, the last thing I'd leave you with here in terms of this slide is we need to think about how we interact with customers, much like our friends at Amazon and some of these other companies interact. It needs to be a few clicks, very simple. And back to my friend from another carrier who recently said, when it's easy enough that I feel more comfortable going to the app to report the claim than picking up the phone to call, that's when we will see progress and a move to digital. So my earlier statement, I really think we're on the right track. I really believe that by 2025, half of our claims will be reported electronically through some digital self-service capability. So Brian, thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Bill. And I think, there's a point that you made in there about we had the solution internally in our call center. And Caroline, I'm guessing this is a part of what you guys were thinking about as you moved some of your tools or saw the utilization of the digital solutions go up. It's the same thing you hear when people put in a new system in place is, well, this is the way it works right now. So we need the new system to do that process too. It's like, well, hang on, that was designed on a different set of needs, different constraints and all that. Why are we spending all this money to just recreate something basically with a new interface? Why would we take something designed for internally trained professionals and expect a layperson on the outside who doesn't know these things, who's used to everything else in their life being, one click and done, to go through 84 questions. And I'm using that as an actual example. I'm not throwing out some big number. I know one carrier's 314 questions if you want an auto and homeowner's quote, which is crazy, right? You can't, and that's a trimmed down set. You can't do that. And we see such a push on underwriting. Let's get to 3 questions, name, address, phone number, and pull in the data. What are we doing on claims then? Because now you don't have someone who's excited to get that new asset that they want to protect. They just bought a new car. That's a great thing. They've just been in a terrible situation. a car accident, a tree fell through their house, somebody died, they're, you know, in a medical emergency, and we want them to basically act like one of our internal employees who's not going through that, who has all that training. So an attitude shift as we put these tools out, and how can we simplify? QR code is one example. It's important to, back to Caroline's point, put yourself in the customer's shoes and your frontline folks' shoes and think about how do we deliver this differently. Really interesting stuff from the survey. I'm with you. I think 50%, I think we're going to see it beforehand. Hopefully it doesn't take another pandemic to drive fast adoption, but I think that train has left the station. I think we're going to start to see much faster adoption of a lot of things. Thank you for that, Bill. Lance, over to you, some perspective from QBE.
Okay, Brian, I'll bring it home. So a little bit about myself and about the company. I'm with QBE, and it's an Australian-based company. Our group is based out of Sydney. For those of you who haven't heard of us, look us up. We're one of the top tier international global insurers worldwide. We operate in 27 countries. We've got globally about 11,000 employees, of which 2,200 are in the United States, which is where I'm based. The US-based operations are in Manhattan, which is where I work. And again, just Q in, take a look at us, and you'll see what we do. So as for me, I've been in claims pretty much all of my career. Started out as a claim representative in New York City. You can imagine what that must have been like, but a good way to train, good way to learn. I can't do this because we're doing this virtually, and I like to do it when I'm face-to-face with people. But for those of you listening to this and watching, how many of you have ever had a claim? We can't see a raise of hands here. Oh, there's one. Okay. So, and I don't mean handled one, but actually had one yourself. So what's the experience, the outcome? Was it handled well? If it was, you're probably very happy. Long since forgotten it. If it wasn't handled well, I bet you still talk about it today. So one of the things in our company, we have a trusted advisor protocol that we follow, and the customer is the center of everything. It literally is at the top of our pyramid. So everything we do is based on how does that impact our customer. The kickoff for this was FNOL. So let me kind of take you back. That's fairly basic, but we have a very diverse force of customers. When you look at what we do, we write all the standard lines, we write financial service lines, we write specialty business. We are one of the major crop insurers in the United States. We have 62 million acres under jurisdiction that we maintain. We have a program group. It's called Alternative Markets. In that group, that's wholesale business. It's handled by MGAs. So when we look at our customers, when we looked at FNOL, for example, we said, well, some of them, believe it or not, if any of you remember what a fax is, they still use faxes. So we have a fax capability. We have an email capability where you can just email in the claim and you will get a number back that will give you a key to what the claim is. We also have a phone system where if you'd like to call in, and Bill, we're not where you said yet, but we still have people calling. But if you call in, at the end of that call, you will be given a unique number to be able to track the call that you just made. We run this 24/7. So it gives the customers the opportunity to call in anytime, anywhere, and give us that first notice of loss. In the banner promo for this, there was a great line. It said, carriers must automate without sacrificing empathy. Now, that's the moment of truth, and that's a metaphor we're all familiar with. But in almost every situation, the first time the customer is going to touch us is when they have a claim. And so if that first touch is not a good one, if they're talking to machines, they can't get anybody to answer, they don't know if it went through, it didn't go through, they don't hear back from anyone, you've just now put a taint on the customer experience. So the way we viewed it is that is a moment of truth. But because our force of customers is so diverse, what do clients need from us? And some of them are not crazy about automation, some of them can't live without it. So we've done things, a lot of which both Caroline and Bill mentioned. We have desk adjusting. We do it on auto, we do it on homeowners, property. Customers will take photographs of what they have. They'll send it to our desk adjusters. The claim will be processed. We're using drones. I mentioned the crop business before. So how would you go out and inspect 62 million acres? You'd need an army. So I think it was a year or so ago, probably longer than that now, The folks there used drones to go out and look at an orchard, orange orchard. They did strictly with drone technology. So it cut the time exponentially down to what it would have taken to analyze that to properly underwrite it. But when you have a force this big and you have customers that just about cover every area of the insurance business, we look at that empathy. And that's why I mentioned earlier on, have you ever had a claim and how did you feel? So when the people are contacting us, something bad's happened. Okay, they've had a claim. If it's a third-party claim, they're being sued, or if someone's making a claim against them, whatever it is, that's your moment of truth. And so what we try to do, and what we have done, is since we put the customer centrally at everything we do, some customers want to see people. Some customers would prefer to talk. I'll give a real quick example. We have farm business, and this is going back quite a few years. We had a farmer out in Montana, and he had one of his barns burned down. The broker called me and said, look, he's looking at the stuff online, and he'd like to talk to you. I said, certainly. Here's my phone number. You can call me in the office there anytime. A couple of days goes by. I'm sitting at my desk. The phone rings. I pick it up. I can barely hear. And I'm, hello, hello, hello. Finally, dead silence. Oh, I'm so sorry. And he mentions his name. It was the client, the customer. He was on his tractor out plowing fields while he made the call to me. So I told him, stop apologizing. This is what you do. I said, I'm from New York. I talk pretty loud, so maybe I could have spoken over that. But that's about the best definition of empathy I could think of. That was the customer. He was a farmer. So he didn't want to go in and look at the computer stuff. He didn't want to fill out a form. He wanted to talk to somebody. So I think, Brian, what I'm getting at is the balance when you bring artificial intelligence, and we use a lot of it. We've got an entire division that does nothing but look for other opportunities. And part of that goes to the second point. How do we empower the claims team? What do we want our claim professionals doing? We want them adjusting claims. We want them out there working with our customers, working with our agents, brokers, and our named insurers to get those claims resolved. How do we make that more efficient? Well, we take rote type of transactions and we apply artificial intelligence to that to make it easier for them. And then they can get back to what we're asking them to do. Adjust the losses, pay claims, and all of our claim technical team spends a lot of time talking directly to our customers. So we've got it even within our claim technical group. I'm in a division called Claim Relationship Management. And what that means in English is we are a single point of contact to our agents, brokers, customers, and our internal business partners. And just as the name indicates, it's relationships. So we work on building those relationships with our clients. But at the center of all of that is not what's easy for us, what's easy for them. And can we take that and translate that into something that makes some sense to them? I could have told that broker in Montana, look, there's a form online, have him fill it out. That's why it's there. He preferred to talk to somebody. Okay, so there's an entire group of people, doesn't have to be Montana, it could be anywhere, that prefer face-to-face, and this is what we're doing today with Zoom. So getting that call from the gentleman on the back of the tractor who was out plowing his fields, I must have told that story 10 times. It resonated with me. This is how you provide service to your customer. You make it easy for them. So we constantly look at that. Where can we take those transactions, make them simpler? And then in claims, we communicate, over-communicate in a lot of instances. We make sure our customers know what we're doing. When the claims are done, we have, Caroline, you mentioned voice to the customer. We have a thing called Tell QBE. It's a survey that goes out after the claim's completed. We think we did great. More importantly, how do you think we did? You're paying the freight. So keeping that empathy up in the front, keeping the communication robust and vibrant is what we do. And it's corporate. It comes from group. It comes to our CEO here in the United States. Put the customer at the center of everything you do. If the automation works and makes their job easier, we're all for that. We're always looking for other opportunities. And when we get to that, we do go out and solicit input. Do you think this would work for you? If the answer is not really, okay, we'll move on to something else. So I kind of whistled through that pretty quickly, but again, the two key things, and they were in the initial presentation that you sent, Brian, was the empathy and the moment of truth. You know, I forgot who said it, but you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. So the first one better be good. So.
Oh, that's great. And I love the story. And I think we all have some claim story like that where
Sure.
it's, but it proves the point, and that the need to stay in touch with what customers are asking for and not shove people down one path or another, which sort of sets up a few of the questions that have come in. First of all, I want to start with one that's a bit broad. We have very different perspectives represented here. Caroline, your business is markedly different from the P&C stuff that both Bill and Lance are focused on, but Bill and Lance, you're also focused on some really different spaces. I know, Lance, you do have some auto and have more, Main Street sort of business in your book, but then you get into some really interesting, different specialty lines, complicated, nuanced stuff. So we have a few people who are asking about this difference by line or by space. What are the differences? One person said between personal and commercial, another said auto and home. We can talk about group and life and annuities versus P&C. I'd love to hear from your perspectives. Are you seeing some adoption, openness, delivery of tools that vary by the different spaces that you see? Caroline, I'd love to start with you. We've been P&C heavy for the last two speakers, so let's bring back some of the non-P&C side.
Yeah, well, I think we probably have decent comparison inside our four walls with the group insurance business and the individual life insurance business. And when we think about those two blocks, we're very reliant in group insurance. So we sell group insurance to the IBMs and the Walmarts and so forth. So a lot of times we don't know the many hundreds of thousands of individuals that are behind that. We just get a block and we insure a block. And then we have to try to cultivate these individual relationships. So for example, in group insurance, if you were to subscribe to disability insurance on top of that, or some of the additional dental, vehicles that we have, you'd then come to us, we'd know you, we'd be able to sort of service you better and to be able to understand you as a customer. When we deal with you as an individual, we typically get a lot of that information up front. So when you're setting up your policy and so forth, we're able to sort of interact with you through the premiums and so forth. And so we build a relationship there more directly with the consumer. So we do feel that there's different flavors when we think about how do we interact and connect. The amount of information we have varies. I think the other nuance with life insurance as different to P&C, you only die once. So you really only have that one moment of truth. And so that has to be very well executed. And you're dealing with that at a time of major grief. And you're dealing with it, particularly over the pandemic, at a time of not just major grief, but shortage in funds and people being really stretched and, trying to make things whole at that time. So there is nuances in the differences of how we think about that. Some of the technology solutions can be the same and they can be scalable, and some of the platforms can be the same and scalable, but just that interaction touch point and knowledge does vary.
Yeah, and being aware of that going in. So you shouldn't expect consistency in everything, nor should you just presume you can use the same tool, or you can't. Right, to your point, maybe some of them are aspects of it, and so what flexibility are you building in? Bill, I'd love to hear your thoughts because you see across so many different carriers in your work.
Yes, and so I love the perspectives, because I think we are looking at this through lots of lenses. And Lance, I agree with you. Everyone is not going to want the digital, what I like to call touchless experience. Some people would not want to change from what we do today in terms of the interactions. So what we found in the study, though, that was really interesting was we ask a lot of questions around automation. What do you think about, a digital report of the claim? What do you think about managing your claim digitally? And again, we got some of the scores I talked about earlier, but all of those scores, every score increased when we added this comment that says, what if you had a hybrid model, right? What if you could use the QR code, get into the tool, and you're starting to answer some questions on the report, but then you sort of get stumped, or you got a question and you're like, yeah, I really want to talk to somebody. What if you had the ability to immediately talk to someone? The scores just took off. So I think as I kind of think about what I learned in this research is customers want options. If you can take some of the steps and automate it so that I don't have to make many different, a lot of phone calls, I can have a really good interaction with the adjuster after they have had a chance to review my claim, because I've gone in and used my app and I've provided enough information that, that the adjuster now knows me, knows what's going on, calls me and says, hey, I'm sorry you had an accident. Thanks for using the app. It really helped me do a little research before calling you. Now let's get your claim handled. So I think as I kind of look at this and what I heard from the study, or what we saw in the study, as long as you're giving customers those options, and if you got the millennial that says, gosh, I don't want to talk to you at all, or you got the baby boomer that says, I'm not really crazy about talking to you in the beginning, but I would like to talk to you pretty soon. You just get the claim started and call me when you're ready to, take care of my car or take care of my injury. I think that hybrid model is the one that seems to be of highest interest among the customers that we surveyed.
Yeah, flexibility. And I will say, which is great of you, you pre-answered a question that was in there. So that's one, because we have a lot of questions. So that allowed me to take one more out of there. So for the person who asked about the flexibility and how do you handle the fast path, the easy path, but what if you need more information? It is this notion that it's not all or nothing, and it's not, well, look, you pick digital, so we can never speak to you,
Right.
offline. It should be totally seamless, and you should be able to come in and out as the situation demands. Sometimes things get complicated, and it's not appropriate to use text or whatever, and you need to actually hop on the phone. So thank you for answering yet another question, so we can get through some more of these. Lance, what about from your perspective across so many different lines? You must see a lot of different, I mean, from the tractor to, the more basic stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting, Brian, because that, our customer base is so diverse. It's fascinating. I mean, I didn't mention we have accident and health. I didn't mention a lot of them, but
Right.
what we do, what we have done is we look for what's the common thread that runs through all of this. So if you're dealing with the financial lines, folks, we have a whole group that does financial services, very complicated. We do SPACs, we do all that stuff, different type of customer, accident and health, stop loss, major medical. So you go down the list. So what we looked at is the bright line through all of those lines that we write. And the group I'm in, the program group, very interesting, it's wholesalers. So they appoint the retail agents, which we don't do in our S&C group. We deal with the retail agents there. But the bright line all the way through that is, what do we do to make the customer experience better? How do we get to a better outcome? So if someone's got a major medical and A&H, how are we adjusting for that? If it's a commercial property or a huge building, what are they looking for? So, again, different parts that are going to drop down from that. But the focus of all of it is customer centric. What can we do within that individual line of business that we've sold? And even further down, like for workers' comp, what lines of business are they in? Where in the market do they play? Are they truck drivers? Are they healthcare professionals? So we've taken it as granular as you can get, with the end being is, how do we get the best experience for that customer? And we build around that. In the commercial space, we have special handling instructions that we embed, with the claim technicians. This customer paid for this, this, and this. You need to do the following things. So a little more work, but at the end of it, we think a better customer experience.
Yeah, and you've set up the next question I wanted to get into.
Okay.
When you talk about what are the expectations and how are you meeting them, there's a great question about customer satisfaction. And as it varies, has anyone seen what happens when someone is on a more digital path? Is their satisfaction the same, higher, lower, different kind of feedback from those who are going in the more traditional path? Because I think that's, to the original setup for this whole webinar, the tension, and I think we've had a great conversation that maybe the tension isn't real, or it's changed because the world has changed. But is that trade-off still legitimate, but maybe not in the way we thought it was? And could there be a better customer outcome, a better satisfaction level? Caroline, if we could start again with you, I'm curious if you've seen where the digital tools are more adopted, what's the impact on customer sat? You think about retention, customer lifetime value, and all the things that roll from that.
Yeah, we did some analysis on that recently, actually, and we were able to determine that our customer sat was higher when they were talking to an individual than when they were operating digitally. And what's a bit surprising, maybe, because you think about the ease and doing it in your own time and all that stuff, but I think it all comes down to when it's not end to end and they have to stop at any point and fall out of that channel. And then they have to make the phone call anyway. It's just better, you don't get as much, ease of doing business as we call it when they have to do that. So until we have gotten everything more end to end, much more simplified, it feels like they can get so far and then they have to drop into the sort of voice channel. But I would also attribute that also because we have very highly skilled customer service reps. So they literally would do amazing heroics when it comes to some of the complexity of the products that we have, trying to unpack that, trying to unpack what was done before, particularly in an arena where sometimes they were manual letters. So you have to sort of have all of the things to talk about. That's where I think the customers, as human beings, we love to feel cared for, love to feel known and understood. You're doing that with another individual. Technology oftentimes doesn't overcome that. Now, that said, I'd still like to see that we will get to a day where, the digital experience satisfaction will outweigh that, because that's the journey we're on.
Yeah, it would be nice, wouldn't it? But I think we're in the midst of that shift. And as you said, a lot of the tools exist. So it's about maybe fine tuning them for the application as the adoption starts to present itself, if you're listening to what people have to say about it. Bill, what are your perspectives on the customer sat and the lifetime value impact of that as we move more digital?
Yes, great question. And Caroline, great point in that a lot of times, depending on what you're doing, a lot of times people still have to opt out and talk with someone. Sort of back, not to overdo our survey, but back to the survey, another good point in the survey is how many times did the person talk with someone and how many people did they talk with? And a lot on the auto side, auto claims, it's very common for someone to say, well, I had to talk to 3 people or 4 people, and I had multiple conversations. And that's where things seem to break down. If it's one person talking with a customer and they're handling things, it seems to be a higher. In fact, in prior surveys, we have looked at this, and the more people you talk to, the lower the customer service score, which is pretty interesting. But let me give you just one quick example. So to the point about, do you still have to talk with someone? There is an example that we've used here in the US in the roadside of the business, which is where someone really doesn't necessarily have maybe they don't have an accident, but their car's broken down and they need service. So I personally had the opportunity to experience that service last year, and it's improved a lot. The company that partners with my insurer has created a total touchless experience. And so here's a quick summary. I know we're short on time. So quick summary, my wife's car would not start. I'm picking up my smartphone. I'm actually going to my app for my insurance company, looking for the phone number. But I happened to see an icon that said roadside service. And I thought, all right, car's at home. I'm not like in a huge hurry. So let me just try this. I touched the button for roadside. It immediately, and of course, then it asked me for the approval to use GPS. So it knew where I was. And I just, again, I'm clicking a couple of buttons with pictures saying, is it a breakdown? Is it a start? What is it? So long story short, I clicked a couple of buttons, immediately got a tow provider assigned to me, received an ETA of how long it would take for the tow provider to arrive. And actually, much like Uber, I was able to see the tow truck on a map and where he was to where I live. So I could actually say, oh, well, he's 15 minutes away. I can go run, I can do this thing. And I still have 15 minutes before he arrives. The other thing is, once he arrived, it was funny because I have Ring at my home. So the Ring kicked off and I knew that someone was there. But at the same time, my text went off on my phone saying the tow driver's there. Takes my car to the garage. Normally you don't, I guess, but I followed him because I wanted to fill out paperwork, and it was a evening thing, so they were closed. I get there and I noticed he was looking at my vehicle just to make sure there's no damage and everything was okay. And then he clicks a button saying that he's completed, and almost instantaneously I get the text that says he's completed, rate the service. And so that to me was an end-to-end service. I didn't, it was set up for prepay. So I didn't really have to do anything except click a couple buttons on the phone. And again, I agree, it's not for everyone, but when the service is that simple, when it's easy enough that it was easier than for me calling and maybe getting on hold with my insurer, then I want to do it. And I think that's where I see this market going. But we have to do it right, or we're going to have people disappointed, as has been mentioned earlier.
Yeah. And this is a moment where we get to delight people by
Yes.
working like everything else in their life, because the expectation was it's my insurance company, it's going to be whole times and difficult. And you're clearly blown away by something that's actually quite simple, because it wasn't what you expected the process to be at all. And people talk about the Domino's pizza tracker. I hear Domino's and Amazon are the two that come up. It's like, you got to see when your pizza was gonna come.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for that, and I'm glad your wife's car. Well, I hope your wife's car was okay, but the process was certainly. Lance, you get the honor of being the last one to comment on this, so you will set the word for the future of customer sat when it comes to more digitized claims. What's your take on this?
I think it's a good first step, Brian. And the reason I'm saying it is claims is transactional in nature. And so when you start with your first notice of loss, there's your first contact. So let me put a little wet blanket on that. It doesn't do you much good if you respond to the customer in an hour and then you don't call them again for 3 weeks. So you've got those pain points all along that have to be maintained. You have to communicate, you have to be transparent. So I think it's a good first start, because people, in today's environment, especially after COVID, they want to do things quickly. They want to get things resolved. But the thing I know we tell our claims folks all the time, and the head of our claims just beats it in every chance he gets when we're talking about training, is stick with your commitments. If you can't get to that person on a Tuesday, tell them, I'll call you on Wednesday morning. But Wednesday morning comes, you better call them. People understand that. We all have different types of responsibilities. We have time crunches we deal with. So stay with the commitments you've made and communicate. I mean, we do a lot of that in QBE. We communicate a lot out to the market, back internally. So I think bringing AI is another good tool, but it's just a tool. If you need a screwdriver and you go get a hammer, it's not going to work. So if you add it to the transaction where you've made that first impression a good one, boy, you're halfway there. So you know what? Bring it across the finish line. You've talked to the customer, you told them, I'll call you on Wednesday, I'll let you know where the claim is going. Call them on Wednesday. If they have questions, you answer them, and then stay in contact until they get the outcome they're looking for and it's resolved. So I think there's a lot that can be added with artificial intelligence, but I'm kind of old school. You've got to keep the empathy of, I'll call it face-to-face. We're not doing that lately, but the touch points with the customer, like the gentleman on the tractor. Could be somebody sitting on Wall Street in the building who's had a loss and calling, same thing. That's your client. Make sure that you're delivering on your promises.
And if your tools are allowing you to proactively communicate, set expectations, and keep them, then your people end up being freer to have those more intimate,
Absolutely.
connected conversations that normally, I mean, we've all been there. You're just too overloaded. It's not that you didn't intend to call back on Wednesday. It's the claim load, the influx of must-dos was just more than you could handle. What if the tools, I mean, sort of full circle to Caroline's point, what are you giving your employees digitally, smartly, to enable their ability to serve customers, whether it's digital or more human? That was a great conversation, and as evidenced by the questions, we still have 14 or so that we couldn't even begin to touch. We had people asking about the impact of fraud when you're doing more digital things. We had people asking about the commercial lines in particular, or maybe it's some personal lines where you have an agent or a broker who's getting the FNOL and then they're sending it in. How do we digitize that? And is it just another agent portal and trying to incent them to use that or not? The group space, even, you've got more players involved. Maybe it's going to HR first, or they don't know where to turn, even though they could have done it themselves. And is the company then the middle B in the B2B2C, are they helping to enable it? There's a lot of complexities to this that I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Bill. You'd mentioned, Lance. Well, we have a website. You can go file his claim there. We've all had the website for years, and it used to just, email into a box that someone would pick up the next day. Building the tool is not really enough. There's more to the adoption and watching that whole flow come through. a great conversation today. I hope it was valuable to all the attendees. Thank you to the panel for participating. And there's no question we have started a very accelerated journey. Bill, I'm going to be marking my calendar for 4 years from now. We should be at 50%. Yeah, I do think this is a case of where we're going to get there early, unlike, the flying cars and autonomous cars that I think we're supposed to already have all those things and we don't yet. I think we're well on our way here. So thank you to everyone for the contribution today. Really valuable conversation.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Care.
Take care. Bye-bye.